Story 1. You assume there are any constitutional Republicans left. This is now my top comment ever. Thank you. Slow but inevitable societal decline. Story 2. They have no idea this is happening. They think it is fake news, and if they feel cornered, they will say the system is so corrupt that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are the only options to help save our government. They cannot play by the rules because the rules have already been broken. They have blind faith in their saviors, much like they do in their gods. Story 3. Constitutional Republicans are similar to small government conservatives and deficit hawks. They only uphold these beliefs when it allows them to criticize Democrats. The moment Republicans gain power, they abandon any pretense of caring about these issues. Consider the deficit hawks. They spent 8 years targeting Obama over the deficit, but as soon as Trump was elected and doubled the deficit during an economic expansion, they disappeared. There was complete silence. It will be the same in this case. Story 4. I had the opportunity to ask Jeff Hurd, who replaced Boebert in my district. He mentioned that all presidents have faced courts ruling that they overreached. When I pointed out that all of those presidents complied when confronted by the court, he said, "We'll have to see how it plays out." So, there you have it, an actual answer from a hesitant leader. Story 5. The Republican Party essentially ceased to exist when Donald Trump took control and has long since become the MAGA Party. Story 6. Even if some Republican raises a legal point to challenge the judge's rulings, the principle that Musk is setting is misguided. Impeaching a federal judge would require a 2/3 vote in Congress, something they do not and would never have. It is simply blatant virtue signaling to their most fervent supporters to sow discontent against the system that is hindering the questionable actions of the administration. This is yet another example of Musk's complete lack of understanding of how the government functions. Story 7. The old guard moderate constitutional Republicans are long gone, my friend. Jeff Flake, Liz Cheney, and Adam Kinzinger are all out of office. The few that remain from that era have shifted to become loyalists who never go against the leader. People like Lindsey Graham and Susan Collins have become, or in reality always were, spineless followers. Donald Trump completely hijacked the Republican Party. Lindsey Graham once said, "If we nominate Trump, we will get destroyed, and we will deserve it." He was right. The Republican Party of Bush, Dole, Reagan, Nixon, and Eisenhower is long gone. It is the Trump Party now. Story 8. I don't think for one second that they don't understand what is happening. It's like saying average Germans didn't understand what was going on during World War II. They fully understand every bit of it, and the destruction of the nation is on them. Story 9. If you ask me, all of the constitutional Republicans are sitting idly by as they watch America face difficulties. Story 10. The only Republicans left are supporters of the Make America Great Again movement, and they fabricate their opinions as needed. The stock market rising under Republican leadership is considered positive. The stock market declining under Republican leadership is also viewed as positive. There is no basis in reality for any of their opinions, and it is best not to inquire further. Story 11. Constitutional Republicans observing Elon Musk's push for impeaching judges stated, "We love checks and balances, unless they check someone we support." Story 12. They are busy invoking Willoit's Law and taking away the ability of 6 transgender athletes to compete in sports. Story 13. There are no constitutional Republicans. There are no small government Republicans. It has always been a lie. Story 14. There are none. They are simply hypocrites. Americans have a hard time differentiating between what someone says and what they do. They can name themselves whatever they want. We know they are not that based on their actions. There are no Republican politicians in the federal government who believe in the Constitution. Their supporters are mistaken if they consider themselves constitutional Republicans. Story 15. I think if anyone has been paying attention since 2016, decorum and the fear of hypocrisy have gone completely out the window. Only Democrats even pretended to care about appearing hypocritical, and even that is starting to fade, with the most prominent Democrats simply not showing enough urgency and resistance to convey the anxiety, anger, and disappointment of their constituents. Conservatives use accusations of hypocrisy in the most cynical way possible, as demonstrated by their support for free speech when it aligns with their views. However, when it involves something they disagree with, it is perfectly acceptable to be silenced by the government for simply speaking your mind. When the only firmly held convictions are that personal preferences take precedence and everything else is dismissed as misguided, the rules apply for others but not for themselves. Story 16. There are no constitutional Republicans. These individuals view the Constitution in the same way they do the Bible. They have the right to choose and select according to their own beliefs and perspectives. Story 17. As if 51% of the House and 67% of the Senate will vote to remove a judge because of something Musk randomly tweeted on a Thursday. Story 18. There is no such thing. At this point, I would be shocked if anyone still sees that transparent concept of originalism as anything other than an attempt to interpret the Constitution using selective and bad faith interpretations that happen to coincide with contemporary Republican viewpoints. Republicans do not act in good faith. They do not argue in good faith. They do not make statements in good faith. It is all self-serving lies. They do not care about the rule of law or the Constitution. They do not care about the Bill of Rights. It is all about power and exploitation for them. Story 19. I love how all the comments on this came from Democrats. You don't actually want to know, do you? Story 20. I honestly don't think there are any constitutional Republicans left, only those who claim to be. The inmates have been running that asylum for a long time. Story 21. What a crybaby. He's probably the kind of kid who would flip the game board and quit or run home crying that it was unfair. Story 22. They are all hypocrites. I once heard Tommy Tuberville say that he loves the Constitution and then, on the same stage minutes later, state that he is a big supporter of Donald Trump. At that time, Trump was under indictment for what many would consider actively attempting to subvert the Constitution. Story 23. What do constitutional Republicans have to say about that? Asking this on Reddit is not very effective because most political posts on this site are filled with individuals who passionately oppose Trump, Elon Musk, Republicans, and conservatives, or anyone who disagrees with them. You are unlikely to receive a genuine answer here. It is similar to asking racists what they think about black individuals. Story 24. They say what their leader tells them to say. There is no Republican Party anymore. There's Trump and his spineless supporters. Story 25. There are no constitutional Republicans left. Anyone who cares about the Constitution would have changed parties by now. Story 26. There are no constitutional Republicans left. Anyone who cares about the Constitution would have changed parties by now. Story 27. I haven't heard that they are impeaching judges. Can I see a citation for that? Or is it just propaganda that these individuals need to be impeached? Story 28. Fine by me. If Elon says they are corrupt, then they have to be put in prison. The fact that this suits me, but if the tables were turned, I would have invaded the nearest public building armed, has nothing to do with this. They don't care. They know it hurts the other side. Rule and law have no importance at all. Story 29. Nothing. This is Germany around 1934. Prepare for Kristallnacht, followed shortly thereafter by their version of the beer hall putsch. Story 30. The party that voted in favor of insurrection intended to violently and schematically overturn an election consists of people who believe in the Constitution. That makes no sense. Story 31. There are plenty of Republican Party members who claim to be constitutionalists or originalists. The party often misrepresents many issues. Occasionally, I find myself agreeing with someone in the Republican Party, as even a broken clock is right twice a day. However, such Republicans are becoming increasingly rare, and any agreement should be approached with caution. Story 32. I am a constitutional person, as I identify more with independents than with Republicans. I do not care simply because Musk does not have that power, and we have 3 branches of government. He is free to express his views as he sees fit. There is nothing in the Constitution that says some unelected person can impeach a judge. As far as I know, the impeachment of any judge must be based on constitutional grounds, and those grounds, if someone were to claim them, must be heard and judged. So I am not all that worried about what he says. I am not sure why you all are. Virtually everything Trump has done has been challenged in court, and he has already lost a significant number of those cases, so the system is working properly. I just want to point out that asking any Republican a question on this website is unproductive. Almost every discussion treats anything not left of center as toxic, regardless of the opinion someone may have. I personally do not care about online points or reputation, but most people do. Good luck getting anyone else to reply. This place is truly an echo chamber. I have no doubt that this comment will eventually be hidden from most viewers. Story 33. Where I live in Canada, if a public official engaged in such an important and controversial role were to make attacks on the judiciary and the rule of law, it would be a significant public scandal. They would face severe criticism not only in the media but also from civil society in general. The official would need to retract their statements or resign, as they would have shown themselves unfit for the position. The crisis for the United States is that there are no standards of behavior anymore. A public official attacking the rule of law and behaving as if they should not be bound by the law is unfit for office. Story 34. It is the policy of the government of the people that their constituents will not be well read on the Constitution if they simply cannot read. Story 35. The unfortunate reality is that there are no genuine constitutional Republicans. They only talk the talk, but inside, they exhibit fascist tendencies. Story 36. There are none. 3 decades of attacking this country for power and self-gain, and maybe a decade for foreign hostile interests. Story 37. I think you know this is a rhetorical question. The Constitution and states' rights only matter when it suits their needs, not the needs of others. It is a purely hypocritical stance. Story 38. It is all part of the witch hunt. When Trump removes the liberal judges, we will see real progress. Right now, he is being held back by judges making decisions from the bench. I predict this will be their argument. Story 39. What are constitutional Republicans? They seem to be hibernating and only emerge when the Democrats are in power. Story 40. They don't care. It's never been about logic. It's always been about loyalty to their team. That's why free speech absolutists like Elon will argue vehemently for their right to express extreme views, but as soon as someone questions his hair transplant, they are banned from the platform. It's been a struggle for power the entire time. They never cared about logic, democracy, or consistency. Anyone who thinks that supporters of the MAGA movement have ever argued in good faith is mistaken. The attitude has always been, you're wrong no matter what, and I'm perfect and always right. None of the actual arguments are relevant. Story 41. There are no constitutional Republicans. Perhaps there never were. Everything they do supports their actual goal, maintaining the social hierarchy. They act as constitutionalists when it benefits them and abandon those principles when it does not. There is no true Republican position, only a means to an end. Story 42. Go over to r/conservative. They are extremely upset about the Constitution. I don't understand why Reddit supports a subreddit that promotes domestic terrorism. Yet here we are, giving known domestic terrorists a platform. Perhaps Reddit will take action after the next batch of innocent people are harmed by them, as we witnessed on January 6th. Story 43. Rumor has it he is resorting to extortion tactics, saying, either agree with me or I will buy your seat in the next election. It is pretty clear he purchased the presidency. Story 44. The only Republicans left are supporters of the Make America Great Again movement, and they fabricate their narrative as needed. The stock market rising under Republican leadership is considered positive, while the stock market falling under Republican leadership is also seen as positive. There is no basis in reality for any of their opinions, so it is best not to inquire further. Story 45. There are many members of the Republican Party that claim to be constitutionalists or originalists. The party often lies about various issues. Occasionally, I find myself agreeing with someone in the Republican Party, but such instances are rare. Even those Republicans are becoming increasingly scarce, and such agreement comes with considerable caution. Story 46. Republicans would rather disregard the Constitution than adhere to it. They display extremist beliefs that reflect racism and religious fanaticism. Story 47. The media gives this South African man a platform to speak, even if he favors an authoritarian government without legal recourse. The Republican Party is doubling down on voter ignorance with the old notion that being wealthy makes someone a nice person. This is incorrect. Story 48. Curious to see how self-proclaimed constitutionalists reconcile this. Is it principle or just team loyalty? Story 49. Judges who apply the Constitution correctly tend to rule in favor of the wealthiest and most powerful Republicans. Those who do not rule in their favor are seen as failing to apply the Constitution properly. The Republicans do not respect the law or the judicial branch. They established the Heritage Foundation and created a pipeline of Republican judges to ensure they could make as many appointments as possible. They have manipulated sitting judges because they understood they needed to rig the judicial system in their favor to escape accountability. The way the judicial system functions makes it relatively easy to do so. Why try to appease a significant portion of your constituents when you can simply buy a Winnebago for Clarence Thomas? Kavanaugh will likely do whatever you want for a six-pack and a promise not to discuss what happens afterward. Story 50. What Constitution? Republicans have just elected their leader. They are finished with the Constitution. It no longer tells them that they are special. Story 51. Your mistake is assuming a Republican's word means anything. They do not stand for any particular value, only for what gives them power or money. Once you understand that, all of their actions make sense. Story 52. I don't like it solely because I do not want the other side to have the ability to do this later. The Supreme Court can determine the constitutionality and legality of these judges' orders as intended. Story 53. Nothing, because conservatives view the Constitution the same way they view everything else. There must be in-groups whom the law protects but does not bind, alongside out-groups whom the law binds but does not protect. In other words, rules for thee but not for me. Try asking a constitutional Republican about the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable search and seizure, the next time stop and frisk comes up. Ask them about the 14th Amendment, which guarantees equal protection under the law when racial profiling is discussed. Try asking them about the First Amendment, which covers freedom of speech in the press, the next time someone is deported for protesting or when the Federal Communications Commission attempts to silence a journalistic organization. You'll get nothing but mental gymnastics and hypocrisy. Story 54. No doubt this will be downvoted, but generally, I believe the mistake lies in thinking that the constitutional Republicans in government and those on the ground are the same. Government priorities favor policies that ensure re-election, ultimately creating dependency on the government for survival. As these individuals expand the bureaucracy, the executive branch has consolidated so much power, aided by a largely ineffective legislative branch, that checks on power by the judicial branch are hard to implement. Additionally, our system lacks a direct method for a state's population to recall their congressional representatives for failing to fulfill their obligations to the state or constitution. This leaves us waiting it out, allowing them to exploit our short memories and a campaign financing structure that favors well-known candidates over lesser-known ones. At the street level, many believe the government is meant to be constrained, but we have allowed it to grow unchecked, pushing the limits of our rights. Trump's campaign resonated because it echoed legitimate concerns, but like every con artist, he shows no desire to fulfill that obligation. If we had the means to directly elect Supreme Court judges or recall our legislative representatives, this would be less of an issue. Admittedly, I identify as libertarian compared to conservative, so my viewpoint may not reflect the overall perspective. But it's worth noting that this is a platform where even the mildest conservative opinions are met with harassment. Ultimately, the sentiment that these posts are just karma farms is not unfounded. Story 55. Republicans view the Constitution as a tool to serve their interests. When it works against them, they will bend and change it to maintain their objectives. Story 56. It depends on the ruling. For example, a judge in New York does not have jurisdiction over a person in Alabama. When he issued an order blocking the deportation of a supporter of terrorism, he had no authority to do that. Additionally, when a judge issues a temporary restraining order on a Friday night without hearing from the opposing lawyers and does not complete the order according to the law, there should be consequences for that. Story 57. I don't think any elected Republican, and most of their electorate, could legitimately describe themselves as constitutional today. Story 58. I'm not aligned with the Republican Party, but impeachment is Congress's ultimate political check against all executive and judicial officers. You can impeach any of them for basically anything that a majority of House members support. A politician who claims to uphold the Constitution may advocate for strict adherence to it, and possibly to state constitutions as well. So why would this aspect of their ideology conflict with exercising a political check that the Constitution itself grants to Congress? Story 59. They will only say what they are instructed to say. They have not yet received the unified script. Give it another day. Story 60. They support the idea because they oppose effective democratic governance. They are all in favor of complete control. Story 61. As a non-American, I often wonder how this is happening. It is astonishing that a single person can take control of the government, pass legislation, appoint friends to positions of power without oversight or approval, create departments, and dissolve other parts of the government, all without any checks from others. I thought Congress was meant to handle legislation and enact new orders. If one individual can dissolve the education board and appoint someone without the necessary qualifications to a crucial position, and initiate a trade war with the world, what is Congress doing? Are presidential powers so expansive that one person can essentially disrupt the entire nation simply because they desire to create chaos? These are genuine questions, as this situation appears to be an exploitation of significant loopholes in a country's system of checks and balances. Story 62. I believe both Trump and Musk overplayed their hand on this one. I don't know anyone except the most devoted supporters who would be upset to see Musk leave. Story 63. The evidence contradicts his illogical assumptions, which impede acceptance of the presenting facts. Some individuals cannot handle the truth, so they destroy books, deny constitutional principles, marginalize others, and rationalize contradictions because it offends their beliefs and perception of reality. The truth is difficult to dispute but easy to deny. This is cognitive dissonance. Story 64. Nothing. They are all blind and deaf. No, they want this. Sadly, it is an evil group whose main goal is to cause suffering. Story 65. I am not a Republican. I am against lifetime appointments for judges, lifetime politicians, and lifetime bureaucrats. It is simply not a good idea. Employees, including bureaucrats, should serve for 20 years, the same for any judge. There should be a limit of 4 terms for a congressperson and 3 terms for a senator. After that, they must return to the private sector and live under all the laws and regulations they enacted. Story 66. The American Constitution has ceased to be relevant or adhered to for some time. It does not hold significant importance anymore. It was neither defended nor upheld, so now it is merely words on a piece of paper. Story 67. It will never happen. They do not have the votes, so they do not care. The branch that should be appealing to is Congress, which can literally change the laws. But since they cannot serve their basic function and pass a budget, good luck. It was always going to play out like this, just like during Trump's first term when he had majorities. Trump does not understand basic government functions. He cannot reign in his own party. Everything he is doing is temporary policy. Story 68. Not being a Republican, I might not be the best person to answer, but I generally believe the judicial branch does not have authority over issues like agency staffing numbers and grant funding. Story 69. You are asking a question in a forum that, by design, would prevent you from ever seeing a real answer due to how quickly the answer would be downvoted by the vast one-sidedness of its user base. Story 70. Republicans are too busy trying to overcome their shock at the lack of decorum around them. The far right and far left should express their animosity toward each other since their bond over easily hurt feelings is so strong. I wonder if they all have mothers named Martha too. Story 71. We need to fund the study of transgender mice and ensure that Asian learning is adequately supported instead of our own schools. Story 72. I have a friend who is deep into right-wing propaganda, and I asked him what he thinks about the things Elon Musk is doing. You know what he said? I haven't heard anything about Elon at all. What's he been doing? Story 73. Republicans will accept Trump's actions if it means a liberal has to deal with the consequences. Repeat this to yourself until you believe it. They do not care. Story 74. This makes me think of the movie Constantine. When Angela says, "I don't believe in the devil," John responds, "You should. He believes in you." Story 75. It is also worth noting that the individuals with the Stand Against Tyranny stickers on their trucks and a stockpile of firearms they have collected to fight government overreach have been unusually quiet lately. What happened to the "from my cold, dead hands" sentiment? Story 76. What would real men and patriots have to say about all of this? It's shocking how indecisive they are. Story 77. If constitutional Republicans cared about the Constitution, Trump would have been removed from the White House on January 7th and would currently be spending the remaining years of his life in a small cell. Story 78. Here is another political AskReddit post inquiring about how Republicans feel about the current environment. How many non-Republican responses will we receive this time? I wonder if there will be as many comments from people sharing their beliefs about what conservatives think. Story 79. These AskReddit threads about "Trump did this, what do you think?" and "Republicans, is this what you wanted?" are very annoying. As liberal as I am, you will not get real discourse on this site with the people who would actually answer these questions. Story 80. Why are Americans sitting in their homes and doing nothing? This individual is a private citizen. Take action and confront him. Story 81. Constitutional Republicans do not exist. Republicans treat the Constitution with the same selective quotes approach they apply to their Bibles. Their likely response is, "It was just a joke." Story 82. AskReddit is increasingly filled with lengthy questions that seem more suited for a political rally than a discussion forum. Why do the users asking these questions rarely venture out of their homes? Story 83. Constitutional Republicans are a myth. Much like Bigfoot, there are rare sightings, but they only appear when the party is in the position of opposition. Story 84. I have bad news. None of these people were ever constitutional in any way. That was a distraction they used to divert attention from the clearly obvious favor brokering they were involved in. Story 85. Was he not given his position by a president who was elected by the people in a completely constitutional manner? Are you afraid of someone voicing their opinion? Story 86. All the constitutional Republicans are gone. What remains are Republicans who are too afraid to stand up to Trump or Musk or to confront them with threats. Story 87. If they are judicial activists, they should be impeached, according to a constitutional conservative. If they are following actual law rather than feelings, then they should not be impeached. The fact that he is calling for something is far less important than the reason why he is calling for it. If they are corruptly hindering executive powers, they need to be removed. If they are doing it based on actual precedent, then Musk is wrong. Story 88. None of these judges have the authority to restrict the actions of the executive. We vote for a president. We are not ruled by a tyranny of appointed judges. Story 89. I've been visiting the conservative subreddit recently, just to see what the discourse is around certain topics. Frequently, something outrageous is announced, and I wanted to see how it was discussed. Often, it just isn't. I first ventured there when the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, regulation cuts were announced to gauge the thoughts on that. The few posts about it have very little engagement. I don't know if that's because they don't discuss policy much on that subreddit or if there isn't much positive to say about it. There were posts about the EPA portfolio pick before they decided to allow only flared users, and that discussion was more about policy and the history of the person put in charge, but most of that discussion didn't seem to include flared users. In general discussions, many slogans are thrown around like "draining the swamp," but they are treated as complete thoughts and don't go further. A post will state, "Trump said X," and they'll focus on his slogan, emphasizing "he said this is what the result will be," without providing any substance. There are also posts that resemble fandom fanfare for Elon Musk and Trump, which seem odd and don't get much engagement. The same goes for the reverse fandom posts that ridicule liberals or socialists. Many comments center on how the left is upset over nothing, that nobody is getting hurt, which I guess means they're reading about the consequences and pretending that they aren't real. They discuss federal workers losing jobs as casually as discussing the weather and then in the next breath say, but nobody got hurt, as if being rendered unemployed has no consequences. They also seem to assume that everyone who lost their job in these mass layoffs wasn't doing their job in the first place. Somehow, Musk is viewed as omniscient, and when he orders arbitrary layoffs of a large number of people, supporters assume that each of those individuals was laid off because they never should have had a job. Comments that show any compassion or concern, like 10,000 people without jobs will flood the job market / cause hardship / can we be sure that all those 10,000 people deserve to lose their jobs? Are largely ignored or dismissed with slogans like, the bloat has to go, or generalizations such as, yeah, but a bunch of them probably weren't working hard, placated with statements of trust the process, rather than logic like, don't worry, it'll all work out. There is a trend of posts expressing uncertainty, ending with, but I'm sure it's all going to be fine. It's going according to plan, and we just have to trust the process. This resembles the early stages individuals go through when they start to question fundamental aspects of their worldview, similar to what happens when people question their religion or notice toxic family dynamics. Taking those thoughts further, I imagine individuals will have to work through these feelings off that subreddit since dissenting and questioning voices are ignored or attacked. Anyone who dares to mention an undeniable fact that contradicts the prevailing narrative, like one I recently saw saying Musk is unelected, is immediately attacked with comments that ignore the substance of the point, merely resorting to blah blah. We've already heard that. Try something else. They seem to have a different definition of fraud than what is standard. To them, any liberal spending on a thing they don't personally agree with is counted as fraud. This includes liberal spending on healthcare that directly affects them, simply because it was implemented by a liberal government. Environmental policies targeting climate change are seen not just as wasteful spending but as fraud. The U.S. attempt at universal healthcare is viewed as fraud. They claim that liberal politicians are bought by vested interests, but seem unable to recognize that billionaires openly funding and collaborating with Republicans on policies affecting billionaires is the same issue. In fact, they regard Musk as a legitimate third-party auditor while simultaneously dismissing qualified individuals who studied and trained for this sort of analysis as untrustworthy. There is a real disconnect between seeing and believing. I saw one comment from a user regarding the thousands of job cuts by Musk as a positive because the user worked in a federal position that identified inefficiencies and fixed them. This logic is flawed because the claim is that the inefficiencies are being overlooked, yet this person's literal job was to find and fix those oversights. I have not explored deeply, but so far, I have not seen posts addressing the blatant mistakes. The news about how Musk supporters misread statistics due to a misunderstanding of how the database worked hasn't been addressed. They ignored the blatant advertising by Tesla on the White House lawn. Although they did post a link to Trump's statement, they failed to discuss the actual advertising. They only discussed the protests and vandalism, labeling it terrorism. I see many posts not focused on the actions the government has undertaken but rather on the liberal meltdown that resulted. A policy or action occurs, there's fallout, and the conservatives discuss not the policy itself but how many people are upset. This discourse seems less about the substance of politics and more like a group of fans discussing the results of a sports game. As an outsider, I have found that the U.S. political scene often operates like sports teams or fandoms rather than politics. This has conditioned individuals to focus on gotchas rather than engage with the substance and effects of policy. They are also starting to express sentiments like, I think Russia is great, actually. I cannot determine if that sentiment originates from U.S. conservatives or if it is influenced by Russian trolling since I cannot identify which leaps of logic are genuine and which are too bizarre to be real. I've also noticed that posts allowing non-flared users do not receive much engagement from flared users. Those posts present information or points of view that don't fit neatly into a conservative box. I have observed that posts on Reddit about U.S. politics, which are numerous, are generally not engaged with by conservatives. The discussion includes people from around the world, commenting on how bizarre something is, while very few conservative Americans participate. This dynamic seems quite insular in that political spectrum. I suppose the few who do comment on these threads risk being attacked as well and might claim that the criticisms come from left-leaning individuals. The reality is that this is an international forum, and when the pushback involves facts and links, it is sourced from people who aren't necessarily based in the US and don't have any party affiliation. I wish that US politics did not so heavily influence the rest of the world and that social media platforms weren't predominantly founded there. I also wish the US style of media hadn't permeated other cultures. There are people in Australia displaying American flags and stickers on their cars, but I don't see those diehard fans moving to a place with unaffordable healthcare. I don't know why I'm posting this here. Probably nobody will read it. Yet, there aren't many conservatives responding to this post, and the place they do engage openly is interesting to sift through if you can tolerate it. I recommend approaching it from an anthropological perspective and with an understanding of socialism, rather than from a place of fear for your loved ones in homeland. Story 90. I can't help but imagine that any constitutional Republicans left have long since abandoned Trump's administration. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.